Hello, and welcome my fellow colleagues, committee members, and esteemed leaders. My name is Gary Pollan. I am from Shageen First Nation, which is located on Manitoulin Island. I currently sit on the Society of United Professionals Indigenous Relations Circle as chair. This team is committed to addressing and advancing the economic and social conditions of Canada's Indigenous people, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. As a union, we have taken this position for two important reasons. First, to alleviate the poverty, social disconnection, and historical disadvantages our Indigenous brothers and sisters face, and to ensure that all Indigenous people are given appropriate opportunities and resources for advancement. Secondly, to acknowledge the many members within the society who proudly identify as Indigenous members of their respective organization and our union. I also work at Ontario Federation as a senior staffing officer and the Indigenous Opportunities Network ION project manager. We are happy to have members from across the many locals within the society. I'd like to recognize Society Executive Michelle Johnson, Chris Graham, Lori Reed, Society's principal officers who are here with us today. We also have many elected reps, local vice presidents, unit directors, and delegates. Today, I'm joined with members of Society's Indigenous Relations Circle to commemorate National Indigenous Month and share some current issues and history of Canada's Indigenous people with you, our fellow union brothers and sisters. I'd like to recognize the following members for their assistance with this presentation. Michelle Johnson, Society President, Craig Kukovica from OPG, Samantha Cormier from OPG, Alicia Sayers from Hydro One, and Pat Oakes, OPG retiree elder of the Mohawk Obako-Sassney. As well, I'd like to thank the members from the Society's Coalition of Racialized Professionals Committee for their assistance with this presentation. I hope you enjoy our brief presentation today and want to thank you all for attending. Thank you.
Opening with our land acknowledgement today is Craig Kukovica. Craig is an Ojibwe from Shageen First Nations on Manitoulin Island. He has been with OVG for 27 years now, currently working as an FLM for field engineering at the Darlington Nuclear Generating Station. Prior to Darlington, he spent 13 years at Pickering Nuclear. He is married with 3 boys, and outside of work, he is a lieutenant and works with the Royal Canadian Sea Cadets, currently in the position of commanding officer for the Corps in Bowmanville. Go ahead, Craig.
Ani Buzu. Hello, my name is Craig Kukavisa. It is customary when we have gatherings anywhere in North America, also known as Turtle Island, by the Indigenous peoples, that we are respectful by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples on whose traditional lands we are holding our festivities. Our Society of United Professionals Union is spread across all of Ontario, and all of this area is on traditional lands of Indigenous peoples. There are 134 First Nations in Ontario who represent 2.4% of the population. We will begin our acknowledgement in the east, where we will put down our tobacco medicine and acknowledge the Eastern Woodland and Haudenosaunee people, such as the Algonquins and the Mohawk. We then go to the south and put down our cedar medicine and acknowledge the Chippewas, Mississaugas, Munsee, Delaware, Ojibwe, Mohawk, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. Then we proceed to the west. We put down our sage and acknowledge the Ojibwe. We continue on to the north. We put down our sweetgrass and acknowledge the Athabascan peoples, the Cree, and the Ojibwe. I would like to acknowledge the Métis and Inuit who live in Ontario but do not have a land base here. And finally, I would like to acknowledge the two-spirited people among us. If I have missed any nation in this acknowledgement, I do not mean to be disrespectful. We honor all Indigenous peoples and thank them for hosting us in their traditional territories. Miigwech, thank you, my sisters and brothers. I wish you all a great day.
Kwekwe, Buju, Ani. I come to you today from the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, which is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This territory is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. It is my honor to welcome you to the Society of United Professionals Indigenous Relations Circle educational session as we celebrate National Indigenous Peoples Day. Recognized since 1996, National Indigenous Peoples Day is an opportunity for everyone across our country to celebrate and learn about the rich tapestry of Indigenous cultures, languages, histories, and achievement that have and continue to exist and thrive in land now known as Canada. On behalf of the Society's leadership team, I want to thank the Indigenous Relations Circle and particularly today's panelists for what is sure to be an inspiring and educational event, and wish everyone a very happy National Indigenous Peoples Day. Miigwech.
Here to explain Society's Indigenous Circle logo is Pat Oakes. Pat retired from OPG in January 2017 and returned to her First Nation community of Akwesasne. Since retirement, she has stayed active on Society's Indigenous Relations Circle. She has a diverse 45 years working career. She was a police officer in Akwesasne. She was a journey person, iron worker, and welder for 23 years. She worked at Ontario Hydro's nuclear plants as an iron worker foreperson and as a radiation protection supervisor. After college and university, Pat secured a position in Ontario Hydro's Indigenous Relations Department as a senior advisor. She was successful in resolving 20-plus First Nation flooding claims against Ontario Federation. Pat secured an executive certificate in council management from the University of Windsor and an executive development program certificate from the BAM School of Advanced Management. She is a former president of the board at both Native Women's Resource Centre and Native Canadian Centre of Toronto. She is also a proud mother of a successful son who is an actor and a charismatic daughter who is a chef. Go ahead, Pat.
Bonjour, Ani, Sego, and hello. My name is Pat Oakes, and I am a member of the Indigenous Relations Council of the Society. And I'm here to talk to you about the Society Indigenous Relations logo. The eagle represents vision, strength, leadership, and guidance for all First Nations, and is the messenger to the Creator. The eagle is embracing a union of nations represented by 4 colors of man: red, black, yellow, and white. The original people in red are embraced and represented by the eagle and its eagle feathers, a tradition of centuries. The symbol of man, the Inukshuk, represents the Inuit people of the north, and as a collective are moving in the right direction. The infinity symbol, highlighted on the Métis sash, represents the coming together of 2 strong, vibrant cultures and a union that will exist forever. All these elements collectively represent resilient, positive energy between all nations living and working together in balance and harmony on Mother Earth. I'd like to wish you all a happy Indigenous Peoples Month. Thank you. Niawa.
So now we are going to hear about the creation story and Indigenous history in Ontario by Samantha Cormier. Samantha works at Ontario Power Generation on the Darlington Refurbishment Project as a field construction coordinator within the Construction Services Organization. She holds a certificate of qualification as a construction millwright and has worked in construction and nuclear industries for just under 10 years, having started her apprenticeship in 2012. Go ahead, Samantha.
Ani, bonjour. My name is Sam Cormier, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to talk to you today about a couple of things. So first off, I'll tell the creation story, 2 versions of it actually, and then I'll get into a bit of Indigenous history in Ontario. Before I start, I just want to acknowledge that there are at least 4 creation stories, and some elders say there are 7. There are many, many versions of each of these stories, and although they're never dramatically different from each other, it's important to know that there are definitely different tellings. So the version that I will start with today is a quick, shortened, about a 5-minute version of the Anishinaabe creation story. There are many ways to tell this particular story, and some versions can take weeks or even years to explain fully. So for now, I'll just stick with the 5-minute version. So a long time ago, and before Turtle Island was formed, there was an island that floated in the sky, and this is where the Sky people lived. One day, Sky Woman was hungry and went out to look for something to eat. She hoped she would find berries or plants that would suit her craving. She found a good tree and began digging around to find some roots. This tree was a good tree. In fact, it was very special. It was called the Tree of Life. As Sky Woman was digging, she noticed that the hole under the Tree of Life opened up into a vast open space. She was warned by the animals around her to stop digging. This was not a place to find food, and if she kept digging, she was certain to fall through the hole. But Sky Woman was extremely hungry. She did not know this at the time, but she was pregnant with twins. Her hunger did not allow her to listen to the animals' warnings, and she kept digging. Soon the hole was big enough for her to fit through. She was so mesmerized by the swirling darkness and shimmering lights that as she leaned in to take a better look, she fell through the hole. Down, 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 the Sky Woman fell into this other world. The water creatures in this other world looked up at the hole in the sky, and they saw Sky Woman falling down towards them. The creatures worried that her fall might upset the balance of water in their world, so they decided it would be wise to catch her. A heated discussion ensued about who would catch this strange falling woman and how they would catch her. In the end, the geese were chosen to catch her fall. The geese joined wings and caught Sky Woman in a soft, feathery net. Now that they had the catching part taken care of, the creatures realized that Sky Woman needed a place to go or she would drown. She was not a water creature, nor could she fly. Everyone decided that she needed a spot to stand, and that the best thing for her would be land. So one of the smallest water creatures dove down into the vast waters and came back with a bit of earth. The turtle offered to have the earth placed on top of her back, and when it was, it grew bigger and bigger until it became the whole world. Sky Woman then had her twin boys, and they went about the business of creating everything in the world that we know today. Now I will tell you the creation story of the Cree. A long time ago, all the creatures that walked, flew, crawled, and slithered lived peacefully together on Turtle Island. Turtle Island was named because North America sits on the back of a giant turtle. The swimming ones swam around in the deep blue ocean. All was well, and the Creator smiled to see such harmony. This story has a character named Wasaki Jack, who is a being that the Cree have many stories about. Wasaki Jack has no gender and often gets into trouble through his trickster antics. Now the Creator had given powers to take care of the first people and to make sure everyone lived in harmony. But Wasaki Jack became lazy, and the great peace and friendship did not last. The creatures of Turtle Island began to disrespect each other. There was much fighting and killing. The Creator warned Wasaki Jack that if he did not obey the Creator and keep Turtle Island clean and peaceful, he would take all of Wasaki Jack's power away. The Creator would take away the land, the forests, mountains, everything. Still, Wasaki Jack did not believe the Creator's words, and the fighting became so prevalent that Turtle Island became red with blood. Then it began to rain. The Creator decided to begin anew, to take everything away and wash the ground clean. The flooding did not harm the swimming creatures, of course, but as the water rose higher and higher, all other creatures were drowned. In a world entirely filled by water, there were only 4 survivors. Wasaki Jack, Beaver, Otter, and Muskrat sat together on a large tree floating in the middle of the ocean. Wasaki Jack was inconsolable. He wept at his stupidity and laziness. He wept at the thought of all those lost lives. Beaver, Otter, and Muskrat looked sadly at Wasaki Jack and asked if there was anything that they could do. At these kind words, Wasaki Jack took courage and he began to think of a plan. He knew that if he could get a little bit of the old earth from underneath the water, that he could use what was left of his power to make a little island to live on. Fortunately for Wasaki Jack, he was sitting in the company of 3 incredible swimmers. He asked Otter if she could dive down to bring up a bit of the old earth from beneath the water. Otter was a strong swimmer and dived down deep. When she came up gasping for breath, her paws were empty of any dirt. Next, Wasaki Jack asked Beaver if he could dive down and bring up a piece of earth. Beaver was a great swimmer also, with a flat, strong tail to help him swim. Beaver dove down deep and was gone a long time. He stayed down so long that he came back almost lifeless, and still his paws were empty. Wasaki Jack had lost all hope. His 2 best swimmers had nearly died trying to get the old earth and had failed. A small voice spoke up. "I can get some earth for you, Wasaki Jack," said Muskrat. At this comment, Beaver and Otter broke out into hysterical laughter. "You, Muskrat," they said. "How can one so little and so small do what we could not?" As Beaver and Otter laughed at Muskrat, Wasaki Jack bent down and picked up Muskrat in his 2 hands. He looked into her little brown eyes and said, "Do you really think that you can do this, Muskrat?" Looking over at her laughing companions, Muskrat mustered up all of her courage and said, "Watch me." Muskrat dove into the water and stayed down for a long time. When she came up, Wasaki Jack looked in her paws, but no earth was to be found. "Muskrat," Wasaki Jack exclaimed, "I can smell the earth on your paws. You're very close, very close." Sensing Wasaki Jack's excitement and hope, Muskrat took a deep breath and dove back into the water. Wasaki Jack, Beaver, and Otter watched the water for signs of Muskrat, but there was nothing. A long time passed, and Beaver and Otter began to mourn for their friend. They regretted laughing at Muskrat. Wasaki Jack stared at the surface of the water, and at last he saw some bubbles coming up. Up from the bottom of the ocean, Muskrat swam. She barely had the strength to make it back to the log. Wasaki Jack had to reach way down and scoop up little Muskrat's nearly lifeless body. Almost dead, Muskrat opened her paws to reveal a tiny piece of the old earth. Immediately, Wasaki Jack took the earth and blew his power into it, expanding it and creating an island. Some say that the creator took pity on Wasaki Jack and his friends and made all things again. Others say Wasaki Jack used the log and some bones to recreate everything again. One thing is for sure, Wasaki Jack never enjoyed the same powers again, for the creator limited him to tricks of flattery and deceit. So thank you all for listening to a couple of the versions of the creation story that I was able to tell today. I'll now just jump into some history, Indigenous history in Ontario. So the doctrine of discovery emanates from a series of formal statements from the Pope and extensions originating in the 1400s. Discovery was used as legal and moral justification for colonial disposition of sovereign Indigenous nations, including Canada's First Nations. Christian explorers claimed lands for their monarchs who felt they could exploit the land regardless of their original inhabitants. The Two-Row Wampum Treaty was the first peace and friendship treaty signed in 1613 between the Dutch and the Iroquois Confederacy. The Coswentha Belt emphasizes the distinct identity of the two peoples and a mutual engagement to coexist in peace without interference in each other's affairs. It's important to acknowledge that Indigenous peoples have unique rights in Canada. It was first declared and recognized through the Royal Proclamation of 1763 issued by King George III. The Royal Proclamation is an extremely important document because it explains how the treaty process and the nation-to-nation relationship would function. In addition, it sets forth how the Crown would associate with First Nations peoples. It forbids settlers to squatting on Indigenous territory. It also stated how all land deals had to go through the Crown. In general, the Royal Proclamation established government administration in North America after France ceded to Britain in the Treaty of Paris 1763, resulting from the 7 Years' War. A section of the Royal Proclamation reads, "Whereas it is just and reasonable and essential to our interest and the security of our colonies that the several nations or tribes of Indians with whom we are connected and who live under our protection should not be molested or disturbed in the possession of such parts of our dominions and territories as not having been ceded to or purchased by us, are reserved to them or any of them as their hunting grounds." Essentially, it explicitly states that Indigenous title had existed and continues to exist, and that all land would be considered Indigenous land until dealt with through the treaty or purchase. It is still valid law since no law has overruled it. The Royal Proclamation is also mentioned in the Constitution in Section 25. The Indian Department was established to create relations with the First Nations people. Sir William Johnson was the first superintendent and heard about the Royal Proclamation. He set up a gathering at Fort Niagara 1 year later. It was a gathering to solidify and establish new relationships between the First Nations and the Crown, since most of the First Nations originally allied with the French. Once the French ceded, it created the environment for the new relationships to begin with the British Crown. The Silver Covenant Chain Wampum Belt was given by the 24 nations to solidify the relationship with the Crown. Wampum belts are a traditional form of contracts made of shells. It shows two people holding a chain between them with the year to signify peace and friendship. It's a document for Indigenous people. The British had the Royal Proclamation and the First Nations the Great Silver Covenant chain. Pardon me. The Treaty of Niagara is just one of many that colonial governments signed following the Royal Proclamation. This map represents the treaties in Ontario. How the treaties were negotiated is highly controversial. It is often cited that the colonial governments poorly negotiated these treaties, not explaining the written intention, while the First Nations signing believed that the resources were to be shared and that the lands would not be surrendered. Moving forward, we have the Royal Proclamation, the Indian Department established, and after the American Revolution and the War of 1812, the country of Canada starts to take shape and the nation-to-nation relationship begins to shift. First, the Bagot Commission of 1844 establishes assimilation policy and the start of residential school system, generally thought as the precursor to the Indian Act of 1876. In 1857, the responsibility of Indian affairs was passed from Britain to the province of Canada. Passed the Act for the Gradual Civilization of the Indian Tribes of Canada was a precursor to the Indian Act. The Indian Act is Canadian federal law that governs all matters regarding to Indian status, bands, and Indian reserve lands. Overall, the Act administers status. It controls the Band Council, it manages reserve lands and also reserve funds. It was passed as law in 1876 and still remains as Canadian law. The historical context of the Act and the Indian Department is that the Brits decided they needed to ally with First Nations, so they created the Indian Department under the military branch of the British government. This department still exists as the Department of Indigenous and Northern Affairs. It was originally established for relations to fight within the 7 Years' War, again in the American Revolution War, and then the War of 1812. The Indian Act means to Indigenous peoples to become enfranchised, the blood quantum, replaced Indigenous forms of government, a Eurocentric elected system. The matrilineal system was disruptive, and the Act has implications for Hydro One, tax-exempt Section 28.2 real estate permits, and has implications of conducting work on reserve lands. I want to thank you all so much for having me today to explain a little bit, just a small glimpse of the background on Indigenous history in Ontario. I encourage everyone to go out and educate yourselves further and understand why truth and reconciliation is so important. Thank you, and I'll hand it back to you now, Gary. Chi miigwech.
During the past month, I hope you are able to take time to recognize the rich history, heritage, resilience, and diversity of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people across Canada. I also hope you got to learn just a little more today and sparked an interest to maybe want to learn a little more. I, and the Society's Indigenous Relations Circle members, would like to thank you for your time in attending today's event, speaking on Indigenous current events and Indigenous history. If you have any questions for the committee or I, or would like more information on the Indigenous Circle, please feel free to reach out to us at irc@society.ca, and we'd be happy to address any questions you have. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.